The Bite Me podcast is coming right up, and it is brought to you every week right here on YouTube by Freedom Boats. It is the best shallow running boat on the water, and there is a model perfect for you. The Chiquita 14, the Eagle 16, the Patriot 18, the Commander 21, the beautiful Warrior like I have 23, or the big boy that runs so shallow, the General 26. Chet Moore and Pooty can customize it however you'd like, and there's a dealer near you, whether it's the Boatyard in Kemah or dealerships in San Antonio, Beaumont, Corpus Christi, Port O'Connor, Houston, and Aransas Pass. Freedom Boats or freedomboatsusa.com. Welcome in to the Bite Me podcast. A little late here on the live show. Shouldn't matter to everybody who is going to be listening on the podcast, wherever you get your podcasts. That's Podbean, Spotify, iTunes, wherever that may be. I am John Lopez. I will explain that in just a second. That is Captain Scott Knoll. That is Captain Dean Thomas. And we're good to go. So let's go. If you happen to be with us live, we're back. Couple of technical difficulties. I don't want to talk about it too much other than I thought I was hacked for about an hour after a little bit of a delay, and there's nothing more terrifying. You guys ever been hacked? By the way, don't forget to join us on the group page on Facebook. Click on there, and we're good to go. You guys ever been hacked? Dean, you ever been hacked?
No.
Scott?
No.
Well, I guess
you got to stay off those nasty sites, man.
Must be something like that. I don't know if I am or not. If the podcast blows up in the middle of our broadcast here, of our recording, I guess we'll find out. But I won't get into the details. What I will get into the details on is this is the Bite Me podcast, and we're excited to have you. Got a lot to cover. Let's go over with what happened over the week and weekend. First of all, if you're looking for Caleb McCumber, he had an appointment, so he'll be missing the podcast today. But he'll be checking in later. Real good time over the weekend fishing, but real good time as well over the weekend with the Flatsworthy event that we talked about a lot. And I wanted to give you guys time to talk about that and some of the things we did. But a special shout out to one Dylan McWilliams. This is why we do it, man. I mean, I was so happy. A lot of folks listening. A lot of listeners over at the event in Rockport had a good time, had some good food, had some good conversation, etc. But Dylan, 14 years old, and you guys met him, 14 years old, listens to the podcast religiously. I mean, you talk about getting bit. I mean, he's got the bug. His grandfather, or is it maybe great uncle, but is David McWilliams. Used to be the football coach at Texas Tech University and the University of Texas. Won a national championship back in the 60s. He's still blowing and going. But you talk about someone who has the bug. He's making his own lures at 14, his own soft plastics. And get this, he's calling them Frenzy Lures. Frenzy Lures is what he's making them. So shout out to old Dylan. He actually goes, I can send you some. I was like, dude, don't send me very many. I don't want to get into your stock, but appreciate it. I'm gonna see if I can catch a fish on one of his lures and go from there. But what were your thoughts? I mean, that was really one of the cool things, but really, Scott, all the listeners that were there and of course the event itself.
Yeah, it's always fun. I've run into him and his dad at Speedy Stop and Charlie's at the ramp a couple different times, talked to him. And then we message back and forth from time to time, me and his dad. Cool kid. He is totally eat up with fishing. Mm-hmm. Yeah, reminds me a little of me when 14.
Absolutely.
13. Yeah, that's all I wanted to do. Mm-hmm. And, I carved my own lures and my own fly. I did all that. Making up lures. Taking a lure that was already out there and doing stuff to it, painting it, doing different things. Always thought I had something new. So it's cool to get to talk to everybody and get to see all the folks that listen. And I can't tell you the number of people in that. It was a pretty big crowded place, and the number of them that came up to, hey man, listen to the podcast all the time. And we really appreciate that.
Mm-hmm. Dean?
Yeah, man, good time. And those events are always fun. Try to get around and visit with everybody, man. But the support for the podcast is crazy everywhere I go. It's just amazing how many people that never really chime in on the Facebook or such as that, but you see them out and about and they're, man, I listen every day. My brother, we listen.
Yeah.
So it's always good to get some positive feedback. And yeah, Dylan, that little kid, that was amazing to see somebody at that age that is actually making his own plastics and
How about that?
and doing that. But yeah, and just overall, man, you know, the open bar, that's always a good time. The oyster bar, the shrimp bar.
And by the way, farmed oysters.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
We got to mention that.
And the Garrison brothers having a tasting.
Oh yeah. There was bourbon tasting bar. There was
That's why I had to stay at Dean's.
Yeah,
Trying to drive home.
How are we not getting Garrison Brothers in our podcasts and sipping on some of that over the course of the show? That we might have to work on that. We might have to work
on a little
that.
bottle right here. We'll advertise it.
Yeah, that's right.
Hey, that's where you start. You got to start somewhere.
You can drink on podcasts. That's no doubt.
We'll make better podcasts.
Yeah, you think with this group, for sure. A lot of topics here. Surf fishing. We got red snapper season. I want to dig in deep on the kayaking because that was a big discussion at the Flatsworthy event. We got some lure discussion that doesn't have to do necessarily with Dylan. But I do want to say a couple things. We always get questions on the Feeding Frenzy, and got a big sponsor that is officially official, and I'm looking at him. I'm looking at the Shootout's going to be one of the presenting sponsors of the Feeding Frenzy. So look at Dean, coming through. That's going to be sweet. So we'll plaster that all over the place, and of course, also want to mention. Anyone who wants to be among the first 200, we're going to pay for your meal. That link is pinned at the top of the Facebook group page. Anyone who wants to RSVP, you can do that there. We also have, the raffle item listed, and you can buy raffle tickets right there, pinned on the Facebook group page. I got one report from Gene Crush from Texas Boys Outdoors. We're already, I think, we're at 80 or so. Raffle tickets sold, but that's probably going to go up for that price. You can't beat it. Oh, I thought you had something, Dean.
No, I gotta get on my tickets. So yeah, that was one from the Flatsworthy banquet. So for the guys, so there is a deck of cards that has 52 chances to win. So whenever they were giving away the 21-foot stiffy push pole, the announcer dude, he kind of tricks everybody, and he's like, I don't remember if he said it was a club, what he called out first, but he narrowed it down to a 10, a black card. And if you have a 10 and it's black, so I had a 50-50 chance of winning, and I did not win.
I thought for sure you were showing that 10 of diamonds.
Oh, man.
10 of spades.
I had the club. I had the club
okay.
and the spade one. And man, I usually do pretty good at those raffles, man. But
you were doing damn good.
I've been on a losing streak lately.
Yeah, it's all right. It's all right. All right. You know what? I put the surf fishing and the snapper fishing at the top of the dock. I really want to dig in because this kind of dovetails off of the discussion that we've had, and we've teased this a couple of times about the kayaking trends, kayaking trails, keeping it pure. And I really want to dig in. We have so many, paddle versus pedal. So many listeners that are kayakers, and even if they have a boat like myself and Dean, and Scott, we'll go off and kayak a little bit. Now I only do that maybe 4 or 5 times a year. Dean, you do it a lot more, but you get the bug to go kayaking. And I want to start with the conversation we had with some gentlemen that were there. And boy, they were all about it. He's like, I want to be, Dana, he was talking to you, I believe. He's talking, I want to be sleek. I want to be fast. I want to cover some ground. I don't want to pedal. I want to, do the old school pure kayaking. There are so many angles. So let's take our time on this. Let's start with, that. that conversation you had, some of the maybe pros and cons, so to speak, of kayaking. You're into kayaking, maybe you're already doing it, maybe you're just getting into it. The pedal versus paddle conversation and finding the right kayak that fits you, Dean.
Well, so here's what happened. Back in the early days, which was almost 20 years ago,
More than
when
that.
I got was well, and I opened my business in 02, and I was kayaking before that. So yeah. Man, that's big math. I had to kick my shoes off, and conveniently I'm not wearing shoes right now. But so the beauty, what happened, what made kayaking so amazing, what put it on the map and where it was its simplicity. The beauty of kayaking was its simplicity. You didn't have to spend a ton of money. You didn't require a lot of gear. You grab your kayak, you grab a fishing pole, a handful of lures, a small items, a pocket full of stuff. You jumped in your kayak and you took off on this awesome adventure. Well, the marketing machine has taken over the kayak fishing world. It has grown into a multi-million-dollar industry, and these kayaks have morphed into these giant boats. I don't call them kayaks anymore. I mean, if you have a kayak, if you have a boat that you cannot pick up, that it goes on a trailer, that you have to put wheels to get it to the water, and it has a motor and it has TX numbers on it, it's not a kayak. It is no longer a kayak. It is just a little boat. And it's funny that you would say, to get back to the old school style of kayaking, which, I mean, I guess you could call it that. I don't consider it to be old school. It's just a different style that is kind of pushed to the background because of the marketing and advertising that goes with. They took kayaks that cost $700 or $800. And I mean, so by today's standard, a kayak from 20 years ago that was $700, say $1,500 now, and they turned them into $4,000 kayaks with everything you could possibly screw on them. And absolutely not my style. To each his own. If that's what you do, if that's what you like, have a good time, spend your money on whatever you want to. But that simple form of kayaking has been pushed into the background, where the advertisements and the things that you see in the majority of the kayak fishing world are these boats that just have so much stuff rigged on them. To me, it becomes overkill, and it's more stuff to carry around. It's more stuff that you got to get ready to get to the water. And it evolved into what it is today.
So Scott, there was a lot there that I want you to dig in on now, because he talked about the simplicity of it. But let's play devil's advocate here, and I hate that term, but let's do that here real quick. There is a market for it. There is a market. There is a market, and I said that before I even saw Camille over your shoulder.
Here comes the marketing person.
No, but people are buying those kayaks. They really are. So there is a market for it. So how do you balance that with, sort of the purity and the simple form of it?
Well, back to what Dean was saying about the simplicity, that's what drew me to it. It was easy. I could throw one in the bed of my truck, drive to the water in the afternoon when I got off work. I got off work at 3:00, and I could be in the water and paddle. And then when I got home, I didn't have a whole bunch of stuff to clean up like you do with a boat and all the extra equipment and everything. I had a milk crate in the back, had a couple rod holders, a couple things of lures. I mean, I could be in the water paddling in minutes. Dean and I would do it on the side of the road up there. Hell, Dean, can you imagine somebody trying to do what we used to do in Florida, that over the rail?
Oh, exactly. Yeah. No, I mean,
there was one spot where we pulled up under the Skyway Bridge and literally pull up, stop real quick because you're in traffic, and throw our kayaks over the guardrail onto the rocks, and then go park the truck and then come back and drag your kayak down through the rocks onto the water. And You couldn't do that today. There's no way. Now, mostly kayaks, Camille's got a bunch of them here, and I can't hardly pick them all up. I mean, there's a couple of them that I can still pick up by myself, but most of them, it takes 2 people. We used to pick them up and carry them like suitcases.
Yeah.
And they were 60,
Right.
65 pounds.
And there's some, I mean, there are kayaks out there on the market that still resemble that style. I mean, hey, Tarpon 140s are still sold. Tarpon 120s are still sold.
Yeah.
And
140s aren't.
Yeah.
160s aren't. 140s are. 160s went away. Tarpon 140s are out there. 120s are there. And then there are, I mean, there's other brands that absolutely resemble that style of kayak. They are out there. They just don't get the attention because they don't have the big ticket price that the dealers want to sell. I mean, the dealers are there to make money. They like to sell the big ticket
in the
items.
business. I haven't been in the business, and I was a rep, and I did demo days all over the place. I covered 4 states, did demos all the time, and everybody would get into the kayak. The very first time that they would get in a kayak, they'd want the most stable one, and everybody was always worried about stability. Am I going to have to roll this thing? I have to learn the Eskimo roll. No, it's a sit on top kayak. If you're rolling over, we're in bad shape.
Yeah.
But that led to wider and wider kayaks and more stability to sell to the people that were on the edge about whether or not they wanted to get into kayaks. So that's where the manufacturers moved to, was shorter, wider kayaks. And when you got a wider kayak, you got more plastics, more weight. Then they were worried about the seats and people not being able to, sit down like Dean and I used to, and sitting low. Those original kayaks, your butt got wet. It was a water sport. I mean, you're going to get wet in one. Then they started putting these little lawn chairs in them, and getting everybody sitting higher and higher and higher. That screwed up everybody for paddling.
Yeah.
You can't paddle from one of those upright seats very well because you're leaning too much. You're leaning side to side trying to touch the water. So that led to pedals, and the pedals became more popular, and people like the pedal. They'd rather do that because then their hands are free to fish, and there's all these other, excuses and reasons. But it did take away from the pure simplicity of, let's just go out there, throw a boat in the water and paddle around and go catch some fish. We had a blast doing it. It was awesome. I watch guys now at the boat ramp. You see them too.
Oh yeah.
They pull up there and they put everything in the world on these kayaks. And I had a guy the other day, I launched my boat. He was already there. He was at the ramp putting stuff. He had the boat on the ground, putting stuff on it. I launched my boat, pulled my boat over to the dock, tied off, got out of my boat, walked back, got in my truck, drove my truck to the other side of the parking lot, parked, and walked back. And he was still putting crap on that boat. And it was forever and a day. And he's taking up the ramp and doing all that. We never used ramps. We just launched from a ditch or wherever the hell we could get to, because it was easy. That's what we were trying to do, was be simple. Like Dean said, to each his own. There's people that love it. They get all into it. They geek out over, we used to call them Pee Wee Herman kayaks. There were some guys doing it back in the day. There was one in particular, Tom. That guy would put everything on a kayak, even in the simple days. And when the first wide kayaks came out, the Hobie had one that was real wide that was a pedal, and he put a damn polling platform on the son of a bitch.
That was his Blue Sky.
Oh, his Blue Sky. I'm sorry.
His Blue Sky. He put a tower on.
He had a custom built tower for his kayak. So, I mean, it's just an evolution of people wanting to tinker. We're all fishermen. We all like to tinker with stuff, but I would prefer it to be simple. And that's the only way I'm going to kayak fish.
Right.
The old way.
And that's what I promote.
Well, that's true. But Dean, ignore Camille trying to intimidate you here. But
no, I mean, I nobody's going to intimidate me on my opinions of kayak fishing. And here's another thing. I have paddled next to, in real world conditions, every single kayak on the market. I brought my kayak. Everybody brought their kayak. They would be paddling next to me. So many times they were like, how are you doing that? Why do you go so fast? It's like, I'm pouring everything I can into this and I can't keep up with you. It was just the style of boats that people were bringing and what they were using. And I compared in real world conditions, long days of paddling, compared every model side by side. And when it came to the pedal kayaks, whenever they first hit the market, the Hobies and such as that, and it depends on where you're at. They have their place in the food chain. Pedal kayaks are great in deeper water if you have water under your kayak. If you're going to fish the flats, if you're going to go and explore the saltwater flats of Texas, the pedals are going, you're going to cross the channel, you're going to go through deep water. But when you get to where the fish are, you're going to fold those little pedals up and you're not going to use them all day. I mean, if you want to go where there's tailing fish, sight cast into those things, the pedals and all that mechanisms are not going to operate in that ultra shallow water. And then those kayaks are built, they're designed to accommodate that pedaling system. So they add a lot of weight to the boat. And then you're toting around that mechanism with you all day that you have to stow somewhere in the boat while you're fishing. And those boats, because they're designed to operate with the pedals and the mechanism that's under the boat, they don't track as well. When you take those things out, they tend to have a mind of their own and they're a little more unmanageable with a paddle.
Yeah.
But those were, I mean, it just, I mean, I'll never change my mind. The marketing machine took over the kayak fishing world and they turned it into a money. I sat in meetings where these designers wanted us to give them ideas of what could we could screw onto these boats. They had zero concern for your fishing pleasure. They wanted to know, what can we sell to these people? That was their goal. But that's their job. That's what they were hired for. That's what they did. The accessory people and those guys, they hated my opinion because my opinion was, this is a bunch of bull crap. You know, that was their job. Their job was to sell things to people. So, I mean, they sat and invented a world to sell stuff.
But on that same note, though, Dean, it was a lot of them that they were taking advice from, and I'm not talking about just George, but in some of the companies, they're taking it from what they call their team guys.
Okay, you want me to tell you about the kayak fishing team? Here, I'll tell you how. This is how kayak fishing teams were invented, and this is where those people that they decided to get their advice from. There was no such thing as a kayak fishing team anywhere in the world. I sat down with Joel McBride and Kelly Woolsey, and I gave them the idea to create a fishing team to duplicate a whitewater fishing team, because that's what those guys were doing. They were traveling the country, and these guys were showing off their skills and marketing boats through the whitewater teams. I said, let's create a fishing team. Before they even gave me the approval to go ahead on and create this, I had shirts made kind of as a joke. A buddy of mine that does airbrush, he airbrushed shirts for me that he painted up the back of them. Wilderness Systems Kayak Fishing Team. I wore those to tournaments. There were other companies, and the second one was, the dude's name was Yule with Ocean Kayaks. He created the fishing team to duplicate that at the same time that we were doing it at Wilderness Systems. And that is where that was invented. So then the flood happened. Then everybody had a fishing team. Anybody with zero credibility could get on a fishing team. I mean, it didn't matter what you did, but if you were willing to go out and claim that you were the man and you were doing this and that, you could get on a team. And then it evolved into, a nationwide, it was
a phenomenon.
Yeah, it was a phenomenon. It just grew dramatically in a relatively short time.
And this is where I want to get to Scott, and Camille can weigh in. Of course, she's in the industry, but Scott, what he just said, I actually agree with. But I can tell you from my personal experience, when I was getting another kayak, I asked for the ride, because I don't go a lot, and I wanted the stability. He mentioned stability, and so this is where I'm going to play devil's advocate, and maybe what Camille is leaning toward. It does get more people into the game. It just does. Not everybody can be on an 18-inch wide or whatever it is kayak that you can pedal, 14 miles or whatever it is. That's what that one gentleman was saying. He says we went 14 miles out, 14 miles back in a day, and not everybody can or wants to do that. So there is an argument to be made that some of these, maybe not all the doodads and add-ons and all that, but there is an argument to be made that simply expanding the kayak footprint gets more people kayaking, hence that's good.
Well, that was the whole point of it, for expanding it the way it expanded. What Camille was started to talk about with the team thing and who they started listening to, there started being all these bass fishing kayak teams. Mm-hmm. And when it went to freshwater and went to bass fishing, that's when all the gadgets and gadgets started up. That's when everybody started wanting depth finders and trolling motors and all of that stuff. And the pedal kayaks, because they wanted their hands free so they could keep casting while they were moving. Mm-hmm. Just as if you had a trolling motor, if they didn't have one already. And that's where all of that really started. Then that leaked back over into the saltwater. And mm-hmm. the saltwater guys saw what the bass guys were doing, and they decided that they would go that route as well. And I've been an advocate for a long time. I sit and listen to some of their meetings, and I was always the dean in the crowd sitting in the back going, can't y'all just make me a kayak that paddles well and straight and paddles and has some glide to it? That's the biggest difference between these newer kayaks and the old kayaks that we ran, the Tarpon 160s, 140s. They had glide. You stroke 2 or 3 times, and then you put your paddle down, and you were gliding. Mm-hmm. And the new ones, you stroke 2 or 3 times, you put your paddle down, you stop. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's like you got a shootout on the back of it because it's not going to go anywhere. And they don't glide at all, and they immediately start turning one way or another. There's just too much drag underneath them. And the guys who designed those original kayaks, and I helped redesign the ride when we redid it. We turned it from a tub that really didn't paddle all that well on the original, but it was super stable, and everybody liked the stability of it. McDonough did a fantastic job on the bottom of it and actually made it into a paddling kayak that still had stability. And I mean, it wasn't as fast as a 160 and it wasn't as fast as a 140, but it was up there. Mm-hmm. And it still had some glide to it. So that's where a lot of that came from. Those fishing teams that Jackson and some of the others started putting together that were all about bass fishing. Those guys were the ones who wanted all the doodads. And I would sit there and listen to some of their meetings, and they would come up with some crazy ass shit. and
even before that, they were starting to modify boats and accessorize them to sell stuff. I mean, that was the goal. But when you come back, talk about stability. So the deal with stability, which the ride was on the market before there was a Tarpon 160, and the Tarpon 160 was before the 140 and the 120, and the Scupper Pro was before all of that. And that is where it was born. The ride was actually a kayak that was designed for scuba diving. The reason that the box in the back, the little area in the back, is called a tank well, because that was designed for a scuba tank to mount into it. To this day, even though nobody's ever put a scuba tank in a kayak and went out, that area behind the seat is still referred to as the tank well. And so the ride was a kayak that was designed for scuba diving, for taking scuba tanks or a tank. And then that was just modified into a fishing kayak because there was a limited market. There wasn't that many out there for sale. And then the Tarpon 160 was invented to have a sit on top that competed with the ultra fast sit insides.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
When it was a dive kayak, part of it, not just the tank well, but also for deep water reentry. So that's what the big bulbous bottom on it that came up, that's what made it stable. And to this day, you can still judge a more stable kayak by flipping it over and looking at the bottom. If it's got more bulbous, or somebody give me a more better technical word for that, around the bottom.
Like chines almost.
Yeah, it's almost like chines or like pontoons.
It's like a catamaran.
Yeah. That gives it that extra stability. Just because it can cut through the water, if it's, it doesn't mean it won't go over. And then we can get into primary and secondary stability and all of that stuff and the differences now. But right now, they started building boats that made anglers more comfortable sitting in it for the first time.
And Scott, with that in mind and the bigger, more stable boats, there's an offshore element here. I go out past the jetties. I go, several miles, not way offshore, but I go several miles. You see kayakers out there. And again, it gets people into the game. It gets you, Dean and yourself and to a certain degree myself, whenever I go, like the quiet, purity, the paddling and all that. You talk about purity and offshore, nearshore fishing. I mean, that's got to be a big impact. And so there are people who are benefiting from this type of thing.
Well, but the thing is, you want to go on the offshore side. I took on Tarpon 160.
Yeah,
one
but you're
of the
crazy.
least stable kayaks there is out there. And that's what I fished for kingfish with. I mean, I'd be 7-8 miles off the beachfront paddling around out there because I could cover ground with it. And
so let me tell you, let's talk about stability. Let me explain stability. When it comes to stability, stability is the physical agility of the kayaker. It's not the kayak. It depends on the personal physical fitness. It's the height to weight ratio when you're sitting in the kayak. I have seen big people get into Tarpon 160 and paddle great, comfortable in it. They have better balance issues that they can physically, they have the agility to sit in that and balance themselves and paddle at the same time. I have seen smaller people that will get into a bigger boat and they're still uncomfortable in that thing. So it is a personal physical ability thing. What is stable to you is not stable to other people. So there is a lot of variety in the people that get in those kayaks, and that will determine their personal stability in the personal kayak that they're in. So it's not this fits you and this fits him. There's a lot of what works for your ability. So, I mean, and I've watched it forever. There were people that would get in a kayak and I would tell them plainly, kayaking is not for you, man. I mean, this might not be your cup of tea, but they wanted to go try and see what it was about. And then there were others that, as we had the conversation, I kind of felt like it might not be for them. And then they proved me absolutely wrong when they got in the kayak and yeah, did their thing.
I mean, I always called them kayak curious.
Yeah,
they were curious about whether or not they could do it, and that's where the sales side came in with the more stable initial stability kayaks, because those people who were kayak curious would step into a Tarpon 160. I'd see it all the time at the demos. They'd sit down and first time they sat down in a Tarpon 160, they'd fall smooth out of it. I mean, they just roll it right there on the dirt. I mean, half the kayak's still on dirt, and they would roll right out of it, and they just didn't have the balance for it.
Yeah.
And that would scare them off. and then I'd take them over and put them in a ride, and they'd get in the ride and go, "Oh, this is so much better." The kayak companies saw that as an obstacle to selling boats, so they started making them wider and more stable.
And unfortunately, for those of us that enjoy the longer boats and using them out here to get where we wanted to go, we're a minority, not the majority. So there just wasn't enough market for 14-foot longer boats anymore. So now you'll see the majority of the companies are in that 12 to 13-foot range. You might get a few that are a little over 13, but they've gone away from doing the long, fast boats, which to me is a shame. I mean, I'd take a 14, 15-foot boat any day.
All right, so Dean, that kind of is a great transition into the next part of this, and that's what we're seeing. What we're seeing with the kayakers out here, and how it might be affecting, what they're doing in the water. You mentioned it briefly earlier about having to pull up the pedals and the paddles and such. But is this more of a like a look at me? I have a cool kayak, but maybe not the fishing expert. The fishing entry point that I need. You know what I mean? Like, because on the smaller ones you can get anywhere.
Marketing is a brilliant scheme. I mean, there's no, they want to sell you what makes the most money. I mean, I've watched
There's more
it
margin and
over the
accessory.
years, and that is just it's what it evolved into. I mean, you can look at how many companies are out there. There are tons of them. I mean, you can buy a kayak at Tractor Supply now. You can buy a kayak at HEB. They're everywhere. And it's just, it has grown into, I don't know if it's so much as, look at me that like, but look at boats. I mean, look at big boats. Why does somebody buy $150,000 boat? Because the dude next door has one. So, the guy has this kayak, of course, you're going to go buy something comparable to that. That's what they sell. That's what they see. That is what is marketed to them. And that is how they end up with that kayak. It might not be the best performing boat to paddle distances and such as that, but it is what they're aware of in the market. That's what they see other people doing, and that's what they end up buying.
Most people get into kayaking because their buddy's into it. And now their buddy has this boat that's got all this stuff on it. So they got to get the boat that's just like their buddies. And so that's where all that's come from.
Well, how does it affect the fishing though, Scott? In terms of
as far as affecting the fishing,
yeah.
What I see out here every day is all these kayaks staying in deeper water. They're in boat lanes. They're where they shouldn't really be. They stay way off the shorelines and they fish deeper water because they've got pedals underneath them and they don't want to lift the pedals up.
Or trolling motors on
or they got trolling motors or whatever they got. They're not scooting across the shallow flats like Dean and I. Half the time we weren't really paddling. We were scooting. Our paddles were sticking in the mud and we were just shoving across the flats, going across mud. And people used to ask me all the time, "You got a boat, don't you?" I said, "Yeah." "Well, why are you in kayaks all the time?" I said, "Because I'm going places that boats can't go and I can't wade fish. Because it's too muddy to wade and it's too shallow for a boat." And that's the places that I love to go and chase redfish. And so it's fine by me that they got all this crap on their boats and they can't float as shallow, because like all the kayak trails, that's part of the question that was on here on the rundown in the beginning, is mentioning kayak trails. Most of the kayak trails are designed for paddling. They're not designed for pedaling. They go across very shallow flats.
or motoring.
And yeah, you can't motor across with these things, and there's no way you could do that. And you can't put one of those pedals down and go where I go and follow these kayak trails. So the kayak trails are really not getting used all that much anymore. There's one here in Port O'Connor. Very rarely ever see a kayak on it anywhere around the trails. They launch out of the fishing center, they go across the intercoastal, and they go into that first little bay right there. And most of them are still there when I come back, and they haven't gone 500 yards. Dean and I used to disappear. I mean, we'd be all over the place.
And that's that's a sense of adventure. That is pushing the limits, pushing your body a little bit, and getting out there on the horizon, getting away from the ramp. And these big heavy kayaks, they kind of limit your sense of adventure. And I mean, and that might be even too much to say, because there's guys out there that still push the limits, man. I mean, there's some dudes out there still getting quite adventurous, but the ability to paddle something that is streamlined and it can go for miles, and then you still have that energy to turn around and paddle miles and get back and battle the wind and battle the chop and all the conditions and all that stuff that you're going to battle out there. So yeah, it's a bit of a personal thing as well. If you have that sense of adventure and you're willing to go for it, the horizon is still out there. The horizon.
That's what was so cool about the kayaks. We did so much exploring. We went into places like over in Florida. We went into all these no motor zones.
Yeah,
and places where they could only pole. They weren't allowed to use any motors in there, and you're only going to pole so far. We could paddle way past where they were poling.
Yeah,
and we were disappearing off into the trees and having a great time back there and
hanging out with the manatees,
yeah,
right?
living with manatees and alligators and crocodiles and monkeys and stuff. And we really did a lot of just pure exploring. And Dean talked about the wind. I started laughing because our deal always every morning was, okay, which way's the wind blowing? We're going to go into the wind to start the day.
Oh yeah.
Come back with the wind in the afternoon.
Yeah, I mean,
it never worked out.
Yeah.
As far as you could. And so here's one.
I go back to what my original sales pitch to everybody was when I was selling kayaks was take the boat off the shelf, take it out and use it, and then come back and tell me what you missed that you didn't have with you. Just because your buddy has everything loaded on it doesn't mean you're going to need everything he thinks he needs. Yeah. Come back and tell me what you missed, and then we'll get you rigged.
Yeah, I mean, that's people learn as they go along. I mean, that's what they do. As they go and get more experience, they learn what they really did need or didn't need on there. But go back to I've lost it now. It was AG's comment that was, why don't they make paddling life jackets for dudes with beer bellies?
They do.
That would work. That would work.
I didn't want to
3X.
I didn't want to single out a group of the community, but there were, when I mentioned the height to weight ratio, I was kind of referring to that. That was another reason, as the kayak market grew, big wide boats accommodated a wider variety of people that were comfortable in those boats. And that was something that just created a comfortable experience for people that weren't comfortable in a smaller, narrow boat.
Okay,
and
so what
got them on the water?
Pro Angler is a prime example for that.
So what's the recommendation then? Someone who, and there may be a group, as we've talked about, that want the other type of boat, but they want to get into, Scott, the simpler, purer style, but they find themselves, tipping over or not being comfortable or whatever. At some point, we all had to get used to it. We all had to make those adjustments. How do you do it?
What I used to do is tell people the first few times to go out, don't go fishing. Just take the kayak out and go paddle and go lean the boat a little bit, lean it to the side when you don't have all your gear on it, when you don't have all your stuff in there, and test the stability. That primary and secondary stability, the ride was all primary stability. It was made to climb back into from scuba diving. The tarpons, they had secondary stability. Their stability was a little higher up above the water line, so that when you leaned a little bit to land a fish, it would start to tilt and it would feel like it was going to flip, but that secondary stability would catch you. and you could lean that kayak damn near 45 degrees and it wouldn't flip over.
Yeah.
It would catch. So go out there without anything in it, and that way you're not going to freak out about losing all your stuff, and learn what you can actually do with it and how far you can push it. And you'd be surprised how far you can really push one of those kayaks without flipping them over. That was better with those lower slung kayaks. There was two reasons I really liked the tarpons and that lower style sitting down low in the water. Yes, your butt got wet. Don't care. I'm in the water anyway.
Yeah.
But you're lower to your lower center of gravity. So you don't flip over. You don't have as much wobble side to side. That you sit in these little chairs that they put in them now, the little lawn chair things that they set in them. Now you're 6 or 8 inches higher than you were previously. And there's some that are even higher than that. Now you're sitting way up there and all your weight is much higher. Physics takes over, man. You lean over a little bit to get a fish, and the weight takes over and physics takes over, and that secondary stability is out the window. That's when you're going to flip. So the other part of it is wind resistance. The higher up you are, the more wind you got. That's why a lot of the Texas boats have no sides on them, or very, very low sides. We're very windy. Wind catches a boat and blows it. Well, the more you got up above that kayak and the higher the sides are for these more stability, super stable kayaks, wind catches them a lot more. The other part is now we've gone to these shorter kayaks like Camille was talking about. They're all 13 foot. That seems to be where everybody's settled, 11 to 13 feet. And those things paddle like a topwater. The longer the kayak, the straighter it paddles, the more boat that's in the water. Tarpon 160, you had hell turning the thing. I mean, you needed a rudder on it to turn it. I think that's why a lot of people get away from paddling, because you put a paddle in on the right side and you put a paddle in on the left side, then you put it in the right side. That's how you paddle. Well, for long, I would watch guys do it all the time in these little 10 and 12-foot boats, and they'd look like a topwater going across there. They're wasting so much energy just trying to go straight because they're constantly correcting. You get in at 140, 160, the longer kayaks, they run straighter. And if you really want to get into paddling a kayak for the exercise, for the quiet, for accessing the backwaters, getting away from everybody, finding your own water, finding your own fish, get into paddling and find a kayak that's 14 foot or longer.
Well, you're not.
Yeah.
There's no new ones on the market that are that,
Yeah, they are. They're out there.
Plastic
You
don't
can
go
go
away.
to Tractor Supply right now.
Oh, I'm not buying a Lifetime kayak.
But it is the exact same style. I thought the same thing until a friend of mine had one out here on the water. I looked at it. I was comparing. I was like, man, now that is pretty interesting. Paddled like a dream. It was very fast, but it is not one of the big name brands that people are look, I've had this argument with the marketing world for so many years. It's like, so why don't y'all make this? Well, it's because they decide what they want to sell. They don't. If they really cared about people's fishing experience, they would create a fishing boat that would resemble that experience. They manufacture what is convenient for their manufacturing process. They put a lot of money into marketing and selling that, and they sell that to the people. They buy the magazines, they buy the articles, and it is what selling is about. It is their job. They're very good at it. That is what they do.
Okay,
they sell
here's
stuff.
where we're going to
And so if you created a fishing kayak in that style and you went out and marketed it and sold it and put the same effort into it, people would buy it.
So that's kind of true. But when you're comparing a boat that is made overseas and shipped over here in containers with a quote rec plastic blend, not a performance plastic blend, you're not talking apples to apples. That boat that comes over from overseas that is 12, 13, 14 feet long and cost you $299, has less plastic. It has a poor quality plastic.
It doesn't mean that it
It's like
paddles
wood.
different. It doesn't mean that it paddles any different. It may be a
No, it's
lesser quality
longevity and
manufacturing
its
process.
durability.
I've sat in them. I've paddled them.
I
They
too.
do very well. And well, we're just gonna have to disagree on that.
Exactly. I have too. But I'm gonna go with quality. And if you're looking at a US
And look,
made,
see here's another one. Camille is in the business of selling kayaks.
no, I'm
She's
not.
gonna give you
Not
she's
anymore.
gonna give you that. I mean, I've heard this for years and years of why you should buy what I'm selling you. And there will, yeah,
But
I mean, it
Dean,
has
I'm
it
not
has
in sales anymore.
it is what it is.
One of the problems with it is that market is fairly small.
That's what I was going to ask. Go ahead.
The number of people that want that experience and want that is fairly small. It's very expensive to make a mold and to market a kayak and do all that. And if you're going to go through the problems of designing a kayak, molding it, getting a mold done, doing all of the work on it, and then trying to market it, now you've got a very small audience. So that's part of the whole deal too, is how many people can we actually sell this to?
Then why do we have a new kayak every single year? That was another thing that the companies had to do. Well, these other products that were out there were great. They were very much established. Well, now this year we have to have a new kayak. It has to be new. They have to put that moniker on the ad that says new for 2025. This is better than before. It always has to be new. And that is why.
But for the last 2 years, you've only had 2 companies that have released new boats. This year, how
many kayaks are on the market? Walk into Bass Pro Shops, walk into the stores, and walk down the kayak aisle and look at your choices that are in there. There are hundreds of choices out there on the market. They're out there.
Well,
but you're right. If you ask the marketing people, you have to give me something new to do.
And they get a new crop of sales staff that comes out of college. They get a new crop every single year, and they come out with their ideas, and those ideas work their way into the marketplace. And without that, they don't have a job. It is their job. I get it. They're working at it. They're
this
good.
year. I don't think you'll see any boats. Well, any new boats. I think you'll see some redesigns of old boats come out. But I don't think you'll see a lot of new boats come out.
Part of the reason, too, that they have a new boat every couple of years and they redesign it is that the molds get used up. And the mold has a lifespan to it. And
why not build another mold?
Well, that's just it. They redesign the mold.
They have to change it.
Yeah.
Well, you could make another mold exactly like the other mold. You don't have to make a new kayak.
But then you don't have a new kayak to sell.
Well,
that's what I'm saying. No, and I get,
you made a big old circle.
this has been really good because you get both perspectives. You understand it. We all understand it. I mean, there's no question about it. I mean, somebody said, I think it was Perry. You could say the same thing about rods, reels, and lures.
Absolutely, especially rods, and even boats, any category in the fishing world. It is a multi-billion-dollar industry in our country, not to mention worldwide.
But look at electronics.
Electronics.
The electronics, the down scans and side scans and all the different stuff. Every year, you buy one, and next year it's obsolete. Man, I mean, it still works. It still works just as good. It was still cool. It was cool a year ago. It's still cool now, but now they got some new gadget, and now
they're good at making you believe it's obsolete.
What does that hat say, Dean, on the front of every fisherman?
I buy shit.
I buy shit. That's
lures don't
It
catch
should be a
fish, they catch
tattoo on the
fishermen.
forehead that
yeah.
says I buy shit.
But this has been great, and you guys know how much I love just digging in on one topic and covering it, front to back. But so where are we landing, Dean? I'll start with you in terms of what I think it's right for me. It fits my budget. I want to fish. I don't want to compromise too much, but I need this or that. Where are we landing in terms of where this industry is headed, Dean?
I mean, it's still bigger than it was last year. It grows every single year, and that's not going away. And there is a kayak out there for everybody. And I mean, it's amazing, beautiful way to get out and see the flats without spending a ridiculous amount of money on a boat. I've spent ridiculous amounts of money on boats. I'm a member of both clubs, but when I sit in my kayak and I'm paddling across the flats, to me, it's a religious experience, man. I cannot put into words how good it feels to glide across those flats, to get out there where it's silent. You're out there with the birds and the fishes, and anybody who loves the outdoors, whether it's fishing or exploring, it is an amazing way to get out there and see the flats. So the industry itself is as big as it ever was. It will continue to grow as long as more people want to fish. And it's the same for boats. I mean, more tackle is sold, more boats are sold, more everything is sold every single year. I don't think it ever goes down. So the industry is not going away.
Now, I mean, it is definitely slowed down. Yeah, it was on such a meteoric rise there for so long. When I was doing the sales, it was like incredible. The kayak companies didn't know what to do with it. When I first got in it, I was the fishing guy at Wilderness and at Confluence, the parent company. I'd go into a sales meeting and they'd make fun of me. And they're like, "Oh, you're the fishing guy. You know what the fishing business is?" And they would hold their fingers up and show you it's this much. Whitewater is this big, and the other touring kayaks are this big, and canoes are this big. But your fishing side, it's this big, and they'd hold their fingers together real close and say, "That's how much of the pie you got." Within about 2 or 3 years, that was out the window, and fishing kayaks took over more than 50% of the market. And it just kept growing and growing. Now it's kind of slacked off a little bit. It's kind of plateaued, I'd say, because it got watered down. There was so many different companies, and the foreign companies started coming in and bringing in cheaper kayaks. And the guys who were real serious about it had their kayaks. And kayaks, that's one of the things, like for Dean and I, that found kayaks we really liked. They don't go bad. I mean, the motor doesn't quit. Well, sometimes it does, if you don't feed it right. But I mean, for the most part, everything's. I've still got paddles out there that I used 20 years ago, and had I not sold my kayaks, my old tarpons, I'm sure those tarpons are still out there roaming the flat somewhere. Somebody asked what our favorite kayaks were for me and Dean, and Dean's talking about the 140. I leaned into the ride. That's the second ride. Because you could stand up in it, and I like standing up and floating across a flat sight casting. And for distance, it was the 160. If I had to get somewhere and I wanted to disappear, I'd get in a 160. If I was just paddling out onto the flats off 361 there, and I was going to go on the lighthouse, the ride was plenty good. It paddled great, and I could stand up if I wanted to and look around and do some sight casting. Dean was 100% the 140. I mean, every day that I fished with him, I think.
So, but before I mean, and the reason that I say that, I paddled the 160 every single day of my life for 15 years. The 140 is the best all around.
Yeah.
That it maneuvered better. It still had that extreme glide, but in the 160, because I was guiding, I carried more gear. I carried gear for everybody. I carried a lot of stuff under the hatch in the front. It was very spacious. It suited my needs, and I paddled the 160. I still have them in my barn. I still got my personal fleet out there. The 140 for a personal individual boat it is more maneuverable. It's easier to transport, and it has all of the great fishing advantages and abilities. And it is the best all around is the best way to describe it. The Tarpon one, the 120, the 12-footer, the 140, 14, 16, 16-footer are all the exact same platform, the exact same hull. It's just a condensed version of it. The Tarpon 120 is an amazing boat as well. It doesn't need a rudder. It tracks beautifully without a rudder. It adds even a simpler process to amazing deck on top and a beautiful paddling boat. And it'll spin around in circles if you really know how to paddle, drag your paddle. You can turn around in its tracks. The 160 takes about 40 acres to turn around. Very long
3-point turn.
and requires a rudder. And so each one has its own specific characteristics, and it's hard to say that one is the best and put it in a nutshell, that it is the way it's going to be. And there's other brands out there that perform and are comparable as well.
All right, if you are into kayaking or want to get into kayaking, you ain't gonna find a better hour than that. That was one of my favorite. That was one of my favorite episodes when you really get every aspect of the thing covered. We will have what would Scott do, what would Dean do right now, but I do want to mention first of all, apologies for being a little late today with the live feed. It shouldn't affect anybody on the podcast downloading it. You'll still get it probably a little after 6 tonight. But a couple of things, the reasons for that. Number one, I thought I got hacked. Long story. Don't want to get into it. Was on
Man,
the phone
I wish we would have had a camera in your room when that was taking place. I would have loved to.
It would have been gold. I'm telling you, it would have been gold because I was like, talking to these people and all this other stuff. And then the second reason, originally we were going to start about 3:45, just about 15 minutes late. And I need to mention that because everything is all signed, sealed, and delivered. OG sauce now is going to be, it was picked up today. It should be by this weekend in all 6 locations of Carniceria Prime in the greater Houston area and 1 in Arlington, Texas. So if you're up in the Dallas area, you can now get OG sauce. And Carniceria Prime is just a fantastic place. So I had to close that off real quick, and it went a little bit long. If you're in the greater Houston area, there's a location in Pasadena, 1 in Porter, 1 on Airline, 1 on 249 in Tomball Parkway, and there's another one somewhere that I'm missing. But either way, you can also get 1 in Arlington if you're up in the greater Dallas area. So a little self-promotion there, but it was well worth it. People are always asking about it. So now we're like in 23 retailers. So that's why I was originally late, and then we had the hacking. But we'll worry about that later. What would Scott do? What would Dean do? I'm going to go fishing again this week. Had a good time last week. A little bit of a breezier day, but still not too crazy from what I'm seeing. Scott, southeast, Thursday, Friday, Saturday is what I'm looking at. What are you recommending here? Maybe even for kayakers.
Yeah, everything looks. It's a little on the windy side, maybe, but pretty moderate. I mean, compared to what we've had lately, it's not windy. If we want to compare side by side, it's actually pretty calm. I mean, mostly under 15 miles an hour. So everything I'm hearing, there's some really good trout being caught. Thank you for the limits, the new limits and everything. I think are really helping out. Talked to a buddy of mine, and he was just going on and on while we were waiting on your hack. Jimmy called, and we were talking, and he had been down here and done really well. So wade fishing for trout, it's been awesome. I've been on redfish every day that I've gone out. I've had good schools, solid, just big schools, tail end fish. So all that's good. It's a little rough to get out on the beachfront yet. I'm itching, ready to go. I'm about to go up to Sawgrass and visit with Collins, and they got a little CCA meeting up there at the factory. And I'm gonna go talk to those guys Thursday night and come back here Friday.
Awesome. Dean, trout have been exactly where we expected them to be, and I highly recommend people see the video that we posted this week. But trout action on those drop offs. What else would you recommend?
Well, the wind makes those drop offs a little more challenging to hold your position. If you're going to step out of the boat and wade fish, still very doable because you're not challenging the boat and getting the boat in position. I find that to be a little more difficult. Tomorrow, I got guys that want to step out of the boat and wade fish, so I'm pretty excited about a little variety. We got really high tide. Drifting the flats is great. I mean, you can cover a lot of area. The scenario this week is actually, I mean, just like I like it. We got low-ish tides in the morning, and it's coming in strong all day. By noon, you got all the water that you want on the flats to drift when the sun's overhead and you can see into the water real good. On our flats, I mean, we still haven't had a lot of obvious bait fish. The mullet are there. The schools of mullet are there. I mean, when the birds fly over the flats, you'll see every square inch they spook fish, but there's not a lot of mullet jumping. It's hard to pick up on those signs. And then today we had this the Saharan dust cloud that's over us that made the sky just super hazy and kind of partly cloudy. It was really hard to see anything into the water. But I mean, then the rest of the week looks very similar, 10 to 15. Good tide coming in most of the day. And for Saturday, I mean, if you're Saturday is like the biggest wind of the day, but still not detrimental. Nowhere near what we dealt with for the previous 3 months.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. I really enjoyed that. And I'm sure our listeners will as well. And I have, you guys really, really appreciate it. Again, apologies for being a little late. I never do that. You know how OCD I am about these things, but it was kind of unavoidable. Hope you guys have a fantastic week, a fantastic weekend. Don't get hacked. We will talk to you next time.
It's too bad Caleb wasn't here to give his opinions on kayaks.
Boy, that's the truth.